Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm Phil. I graduated from Cambridge studying law in 2018, and with me today I have Ilya, and today we're going to be talking about the things that we wish we had known before applying, things we should have prepared earlier, and make sure that if you have any questions, leave them in the comments because we will be answering them in the second part of this video, which will be going up on Ilya's channel. So I guess for anybody who hasn't seen your channel yet, Ilya, could you just sort of introduce yourself and give them a bit of a flavor of what they can find over there as well? And we'll leave the link in the description.
Hello, my name is Ilya. I'm a student at the University of Cambridge. I did my undergrad there, graduating last year. I studied natural sciences and I'm now doing a master's in biology at Cambridge. Like Phil mentioned, I have a YouTube channel called Ilya's Cambridge Advice, where I make videos which mostly try to help you with applying to Oxbridge.
Cool. So yeah, this is really just going to be sort of more of a fireside chat. It's not scripted, so we haven't prepared sort of super efficient answers in advance. We're really just going to talk about the sort of things that we wish that we had known, so that this will be helpful for you when you do apply, or if you are applying, or if you do even maybe have an offer. And the first thing is really going to be, what did we wish we knew before applying? And for me, I applied for, I studied law, and really it was about figuring out what would have put me in the best position possible. And I think one thing that's consistently come up when I've been talking to people about it is, like, when you're applying for law, you think of it as being like a vocational subject. So people are stressing out about not having enough work experience, about trying to get all of these things, like going and working for a law firm or getting some work experience shadowing a barrister, when in reality, for me, and I think for law, what they're looking for is not necessarily that actual aspect. It's more going deep on the subject. Studying law is super academic, at least at Cambridge. It's not like you leave and then you're qualified as a lawyer. So that would be the same as any university you study that at in England. And it's just about immersing yourself in the subject, going ahead and looking at the reading, trying to figure out what is it that you really enjoy and going deep on that, because that will put you in the best position when you apply and go for interview. But I think it is obviously, like, natural sciences doesn't necessarily lend itself to like something vocational, but do you feel like people were trying to do work experience and trying to work in a lab at the same time, or not?
I don't think there's many students who had the opportunity to work in a lab before coming to university. There's people who have done science research projects at school, which I think is great. For example, I did an EPQ, an extended project qualification, in year 12 at my school, and a science project. And I think that very much helped my application. And I think that if you have the opportunity to do a research project of any kind for any subject, I would recommend you do it. It can definitely help you get into pretty much any university. But whether it's essential that you do like a research project or work experience, it's not essential. But I think it can help, because ultimately what the admissions tutors at Cambridge are looking for are a few things. One of them is academic potential, so from good grades, but also genuine interest in your subject. And you can indicate that you're genuinely interested in your subject by doing work experience or research or that kind of stuff. But they do appreciate that people don't always have those opportunities. So they take all these factors into consideration in your application.
Yeah, I mean, like, for example, you mentioned going for the EPQ. I didn't do an EPQ, but I entered into some essay prizes. Did you also do some stuff like that just to boost your super-curriculars?
I didn't do any essay prizes, I'd say. I think the main things I did was just A-levels and EPQ.
Yeah.
It's enough, really.
Yeah, exactly. I think, and I think especially today with EPQs, like, for example, when I applied, I didn't apply with, or at least we applied with AS levels. So when you were applying, had they already removed AS levels or not at that point?
I was in the year group where I did maths AS, but the year afterwards they didn't, and my other A levels were all linear, so
Okay.
no AS. But I did 2 A levels in year 12 because I did double maths, and the way my school taught double maths is you do maths in year 12 and double maths in year 13. And I also did Dutch A level because I speak it anyway, so I did 2 A levels in year 12, but that's not very representative.
Oh, cool. Yeah, because I was going to say that with people who haven't done any, like, who don't have any A-level grades, whereas before you would have your GCSEs and then your ASs, and in your case, you actually had some full A levels even when you were applying. If you're going for it today, then you don't actually have those ASs. You've got no public exams that you took in year 12 necessarily, unless you did maths early or any other subjects early. So what I've been hearing is that actually doing the EPQ can put yourself in a really good position, because you do actually have like that A or that A star, ideally, grade when you are actually applying. So yeah, that's a good point.
And just to add to that, the last few years, obviously, we've been affected by the pandemic, and therefore many of the grades people have received are predicted grades. And there's students now applying to Cambridge who, from my understanding, have done no exams for like years and years, which means that the confidence that people have in those grades is not very high, which is why I think any further evidence that you're smart or that you're interested in your subject is very valuable. And something which I forgot to add earlier is that another way you can really show interest in your subject and also learn more about your subject is reading. Just reading around your subject can be very helpful.
When do you get started with that reading? Because what I refer to people often is like that on the Cambridge website, there's that bit which is like Cambridge Super-curricular list, and they've got a lot of stuff for you to start. But when did you actually go to start? Did you use that list as well?
I think I used to read more when I was maybe like in primary school. Then I didn't really read until at the start of year 13, when I kind of had a phase where I felt uncultured, and then I read a few books, including one which I think was recommended on the Cambridge reading list called The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins. And I very much enjoyed reading it, and it's very relevant to what I was applying for. And I think it did help me get in. Like some of the terminology I used in my Cambridge interview came from that book, for example. So I'd say, the start of year 13 is when I did a good amount of reading.
And did you use that as like the entrance way into going deeper into the subject? So using that as like the primary initial reading, and then going really deep so that you could have something in your personal statement where you were like, okay, I did my research on this, and maybe is that what sort of led you into what you're doing in your EPQ?
I did my EPQ in year 12, so my EPQ preceded my reading, actually. But I actually didn't talk about any books in my personal statement, because I was aware that, first of all, it's very cliche to talk about the selfish gene as a biology student in your personal statement, but also I've heard that they can very much ask you very in-depth questions about any books you've listed, and I didn't want to be in a position where they might grill me about a book, so I just didn't mention any books in my personal statement.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's a tactic, I guess. If you're not comfortable talking about books they haven't read too much, you just don't put them on. Like, what did you put on instead then? Was it talking about your EPQ?
A good amount of my personal statement was talking about my EPQ,
Okay. Yeah, because for me, it was like, what's the entry point into the reading? It was these very short introductions, like those books, like the really, really thin ones, which literally just like 100 pages each. I took a couple of those for each one, read those, and then had a good overview of the overall subject. And then off the back of that, at the back, they would always have additional reading, or I found that these topics were super interesting. And then I was able to go deep. So taking sort of like a funneled approach, going broad at the top, and then going deeper and deeper and deeper, and sort of trying to bring that out then in the personal statement. It's like something that actually I didn't necessarily mention all of those books, because as you say, you don't expose yourself up, and they could ask you about one of those books and you just have no idea what to say. Then that's sort of that was my approach to it.
I will add, I very much also like the very short introduction to books. Although they're so short, they do contain just an insane amount of information. And I read the Cell, a very short introduction to the Cell, during year 13, and the content in there included a lot of content well beyond A-level biology, and therefore by including some of that content, made it easier to get an A star. In A-level biology, you had to do an essay and you had to include extra content. So even that small amount of reading did help me get a better grade. Additionally, I will add that there are people who who say they've read books and put them on their personal statement, and who have actually gone to Oxford. Like, that is a thing that happens, although I wouldn't recommend that tactic.
So they've said that they've read the book, they put it on the personal statement when they actually haven't read it.
Yeah, and I know people who've done that and they've got in. Like, I know people who, this person, they got an offer, they actually missed their grades, but they said that they'd read this book, and in the interview they were asked about this book, they made up some stuff, and they got an offer.
Whoa. I guess that's if they've got the art of art of BSing their way through stuff, then you can do that. But for mere mortals like us, or for anybody watching, you'll know yourself best. Yeah, I'd sort of steer away from that probably. What do you think?
I wouldn't recommend it, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, and then what do you do like when you've actually sort of figured out what you're going to put on your personal statement? Like, did you then go ahead and before interview just like prepare everything that you'd put on there just to make sure that you absolutely nailed it down? Because that was sort of one of the things which I was sort of advised to do. Anything that you put on your personal statement is fair game. If you don't know it and they ask you, it's like meant to be a warm-up question, and then it's just going to leave a bad impression on them if you can't even answer the stuff that you put on your personal statement.
I think before you go into your interview, you very much should just memorize your application, like every aspect of it, particularly the personal statement. But in addition to that, try to get access to your reference. So when you apply to university, your teachers will write you a reference and they can write anything they want there. And the interviewers can ask you questions about what's in your reference. For example, the first question I was asked in one of my interviews at Cambridge was about something in my reference, was about some project I was involved with at school. And this was not in my personal statement because I didn't want to talk about it actually, but it came up in my reference and therefore they talked about it. And I had seen my reference, so I was slightly prepared for it. But had I not read my reference, I would have been much less prepared for that question.
Oh, that is actually a super tip. Like, so they don't talk about, I guess, one of those secrets that, yeah, you only know if you've actually been through it. And so they just sort of took that as the main thing that you're talking about in the interview then, like rather than.
It was the main first question. It was the first question. Like, then they were like, it says here you're involved in this project. Please tell us about what you did. So I talked about that, and it was only brief, but it was the first question that they asked in my second interview.
Like, was there anything where you left the interview or during like the time when you were being interviewed where you thought, oh, if only I had prepared that better, or sort of even left and you thought, oh, I should have done this, I should have memorized this bit or gone into this bit of reading, or I should have practiced this better in the interview, like just coming across more natural or smiling or something like that? Or maybe they just ask you a really tough question that you couldn't have prepared for, like maybe that was the main thing that you left.
There were things which I could have like answered better. For example, I was once in the same interview I just talked about, my second interview, I was asked about electron microscopes, and I mentioned how this one microscope wasn't powerful enough, and they asked me like, oh, why is it not powerful enough? And my understanding of how electron microscopes work wasn't great enough to like properly explain it, so my answer was probably wrong. Initially, in my first interview, they were trying to get me to grasp this idea, and I was struggling to grasp it. It's only as I left the room I realized, oh, that's how you do it.
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff. But overall, I think I did all right, and I came out both interviews smiling, and it worked out all right.
Yeah, obviously, it clearly worked out well in the end. And like, was it the same for masters? Like, I never applied for a masters. Actually, I'm going to get my sort of Cantab masters soon. But what was it like applying for your masters? Did you also have to re-interview, or was it like you'd sort of just, as long as you got the grades, you would get to do the masters? What's the process like that?
The experience was completely different. Initially, it was a pandemic, so I was an online interview. But no, I applied in December last year. It's for an MPhil in biological sciences, and this is a research master's, so there's no classes, no teaching, it's all in the lab doing research. So you approach a supervisor. So I approached one of my lecturers from second year who I very much liked, and he seemed interested in having me in his group, and we discussed a project proposal, and then I finalized my application. I sent it. I think it cost like £70 to send, and then a few weeks later, I get invited to an interview with a member of the department who's not the proposed supervisor. And the person who interviewed me was someone who'd lectured me quite a few times and who I was relatively familiar with. So I felt very comfortable during the interview. And the interview covered a few things. It was talking about my research experience. It talked about the proposed project, and it talked about my future aims, why I'm applying for the MPhil. That's like just quite standard stuff. And it was quite, it was fine. Like at the end, the guy said, yeah, you should be fine. And a few weeks later or something, I got the email saying, you got an offer, you need to get a T1 or more, and you've got it. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So would you say it was like less of a stressful experience than applying for the initial undergrad?
I'd say it's less stressful. Yeah, much less stressful. And plus, like, the time span is so much smaller, because when you want to go to Oxford, like by the October 15th, you got to send in your application, and then get the entrance exam, and then the interview, and then the offer, and then you get the grades. It's like a whole year-long process, whilst the MPhil application is a much shorter process.
Yeah. And what's next? I guess, are you, after the masters, are you going to go for the PhD, like full on academic, or is that still up in the air right now?
My current plan is, once I finish my MPhil in August, I'll apply for a PhD after that. So I'll have next year out, and then hopefully PhD year after that.
Okay, cool. So I guess the next time, well, soon we'll be doing one of these, and it'll be Dr. Carey then.
It'll take a few years before that, but maybe.
Well, cool. I mean, yeah, it's been fantastic having this sort of, I guess, more unscripted chat about sort of, what we wish we'd known sort of before applying, things we could have prepared earlier. I think, we'll probably keep it at that. But I mean, before we sort of wrap up, I mean, do you think there are any sort of final things that you wish you would have known sort of before applying, or during, or even after, like when you're actually at Cambridge, like that you think would have been really useful for people watching to know?
Everything you need to know to get into Oxford is available online, either like on official websites, or like, I don't know, random people's YouTube channels. But everything you do need to know is available online. So as long as you're like motivated and driven and going out there doing your research, you should be able to know everything to make a good application.
Cool. Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for your time, Ilya. It's been fantastic to have you on. Again, for everybody who's watching, make sure to leave your comments below with any other questions you have. And the next video we'll be doing on Ilya's channel. And so we'll be answering all of those. We can have all of those prepared, and we'll do a little bit more scripted. But thanks everybody for tuning in. And once again, thanks so much, Ilya, for coming on.
No worries. Thank you. Bye-bye.